Listen. Cold breath held, a crosshair settles on a German spotter at a broken sill, and a second glint, thin as fish scale, blinks deeper in the ruin. Another rifle is already hunting this same slice of air. He eases off the trigger. The snow carries sound like a wire, and one shot now would make a bell of brick. He reads a city by its fractures. Vasily Zaitsev moves through beams and blistered brick with a Mosin Nagant 9130 shouldered and its PU scope rubbed with soot to kill shine. He runs the bolt dry on purpose so steel won't seize and sing. 300 meters is his private standard in streets that never open. He counts brick courses, window bays, the slow drift of ash across a sill, range by rhythm, not meadow. The cracked crescent at the lens edge is a flaw he's learned to see past, a safeguard against giving himself away when sun finds glass. The tally that lifted him out of the rail yards sounded like propaganda before Danilov, the political officer, gave it ink. Officers first, the cap bands a darker stripe at 100 meters through smoke, then spotters whose hands kept new men alive. He had fired from a stair throat lined with torn wallpaper, from a coal hopper that smelled like bread, from behind a perforated wall where wind made bullets lie. Each kill cut a thread of German communication and stitched his name to a river crossing, a factory floor, a headline torn and pasted beside their nest. Reputation travels louder than a report. Loud things draw counterfire. Danilov made sure the name traveled. His pencil ran fast, turning numbers into a story and stories into heat for walls that had none. Pravda needed a victory shape in a city with no roofs. Zaitsev. Aviates over death, hunter of hunters became newsprint flags tacked to brick. Vasily liked that the paper warmed the room and hated that the sheets also fluttered in blast gusts like signals to a man he could not see. The Germans read them too. Dead zones trade wind-blown newspapers. Officers stopped standing where they used to stand. Caps stayed low. Periscopes paused. Then decoys arrived, helmets on sticks, tugged along wires, tapping rubble with a hollow ring that would betray a rash trigger to any ear pressed to brick. Fire at the wrong echo, and the ice will tell a superior where your muzzle breathes. Kulikov, his spotter, had a face that bled in cold and patience measured in cord tugs, not words. They took watches with their eyelids, 50 minutes for one, 60 for the other, the last 10 worst because the mind invents movement when glass has nothing to feed it. They swallowed steam into scarves, learned to push breath downward, pissed through cloth rolls without moving. Danilov said their example kept the city in place. Kulikov counted seconds between German shots so they could move on another man's reload. Snow argues. The Volga exhales fog without pattern. A clear hour vanishes. A dirty one becomes a screen for crossing. A curtain tightens until silhouettes lie. River breath mixes with smoke from red October and packs into loosened glass. A shard embedded in plaster can flash like a signal at the wrong instant. Sun here cuts rather than warms. Glint is a language you learn to muzzle. The first time his name came back from the wrong direction, a prisoner with a split lip asked a guard if the famous Russian hunted the city. Rumor made camp in the wrong trench. Attention is a path you lay for others to follow. He kept shooting because war has no pause, and he stopped using the same 2 walls twice because fame gives away your hands. At the grain elevator ruins, he took a shot against what looked like a spotter turning to signal, a silhouette clean enough to tempt. The body dipped and stayed. No runner came. No reaction at all. The first non-response of that exact kind. Next day, a helmet lifted and danced a slow half-meter, tapping brick once. He did not fire. An hour later, a real head rose 3 houses away, sure the fish was cautious, and he put a 7.62 millimeter argument through the ear. "They're fishing us," he told Danilov. "We're fishing them harder," Danilov wrote, and the phrasing made bait of both. By red October, Ammunition felt borrowed. Night boats worked the Volga under tracer nets, men passing packets of rounds under tarps into basements that shouldn't stand. Scopes got a particular kind of priority that often wasn't available. Every round was palmed warm before it was chambered. The bolt moved slow so metal wouldn't speak. 300 meters stayed their zero because the city insisted on that hazard. A man's character shows in how he feeds his rifle when snow shakes. 2 days after the first decoy helmet tapped, officer casualties along their stretch dropped. The morning after, the countersniper rhythm changed. Shots came from angles that asked you to show a shoulder. The first miss in weeks didn't bring a second. It brought deliberate silence, not aftermath, but expectation. Someone had taught the other side to use not firing as pressure. Someone new or someone patient, Kulikov said into his scarf. Patience means more than waiting when a room has only 3 breathing holes. They mapped the factory district differently. Nikolai drew angles on paper torn from a ledger, placing where a glint could exist beyond ordinary sight unless a breath plume gave it away. They marked dead ground, guessed how the German would slip between rail cars and climb blur stairs that had been boards. The new adversary, if it was one man, understood glass and steel. He avoided the comfortable upper-floor setback most favored. His positions had one problem and one advantage: a tunnel view masked with a steel plate cut to a slit. In a courtyard, a body lay cheek down on ice, the posture grotesquely helpful. The angle drew the eye. They listened. The stillness that usually betrays impatience dressed itself in waiting. Breath wanted to crown and scatter in a sunshaft. A glove went to face. Then a micro-glint. Behind a rust-streaked slab, a steel plate set with a slit, an opening no wider than a coin cut. They shifted hides 4 times that week because bombardment reshaped the map. They moved not on safety, but on the expectation a patient rival might have of their timing. Danilov taped up another headline, watched it flutter as if the paper itself tried to leave. Words keep a regiment on the line 2 days longer. They also bait the kind of enemy who shows up for a name. Behind that slit was someone who read or had been sent because someone else did. Frozen oil isn't a story. It kills. He stripped the bolt in a stairwell throat without light and put it back by feel, choosing to run the action bare. The choice is irreversible until warmth returns. The risk is absolute. Misassembly will click at the wrong time and call a hunt down 3 houses. Communication stayed prearranged. 3 tug and pause. 2 tug stop. A glove drawn against brick when hands were tied. Radios were for batteries, not for 2 men sharing a thermos lid of melted snow. Runners carried orders and rumors. Rumor, used well, lowers a rifleman's heart rate in a yard where he otherwise would kill you. The one they heard was geometric, not poetic. Someone precise had come with superior glass and patience like wire. Decoys bloomed in the same alleys each dawn, as if repetition could teach. A wind tremor tugged them sometimes. Intellect did the rest. If a duel was coming, they wouldn't choose the hour. The Volga fog played. It didn't clock. They built nest and muscle for a day that smoke could steal. Kulikov found a rebar cross in line with a lane he didn't trust and tapped Vasily's toe twice. Look. Through the cracked lens edge, the street sliced into plausible harm. Behind a low window, glass dust made a milky haze, a good backdrop to read a muzzle shadow if one ever kissed it. The adversary would know that trick, too. They tested their own bait. A scrap of cap felt eased over a brick and lifted so slow it could be a trick of light. Nothing. An hour later, snow stuttered above a beam where no draft played, the tremor of a stock settling. Then nothing again. The unkind thing about this hunter was his refusal to prove he could hit a rag at 20 meters of air. He declined invitations and by declining measured their intelligence. Respect has weight. It sits on your chest until your trigger finger lies. Across days, the slit gathered a white rim of frost where breath had melted and refroze along a line no shell had made. The first morning's glint could be chance, the second's was response without movement. That was the tell. Light changed minutely, not shape. Behind that razor was an eye. "There," Kulikov whispered, a hair combing frost. The presence made of waiting. They would not kiss their last round goodbye at a guess. Names slid into the room. Danilov offered one from rumor, Major Erwin König or Thorvald, depending on which prisoner valued fear differently. German records would be blank later, which is its own tactic. What mattered now was fingerprint, not signature. Staged corpses, helmet on a wire, non-engagement as pressure, a slit plate at a wrong height. Rank showed in method better than in tabs, they'd never see through steel. In a city where stepping wrong kills, a duel is both privilege and risk. Vasily had fought rifles, MGs, roofs falling, sleep, and his own legend. This adversary turned every flaw into a stage. Confidence becomes overexposure in front of a slit that waits. Patience only helps if hunger and frost don't turn your trigger finger into a liar. A knuckle brushed wood, and the small sound told them what they already knew. Sound travels through snow like a shout through command. They ate in place. Movement at this range marks you. Black bread cracked like bark. Hunger sat hot where missed shots lived. Ammunition was down to what sane men would send a runner for. None did. A battery had found the crossing the night before, chewing the river. Danilov's dispatch lay rolled, headline curling, a hook at the edge of sight. When the wind died, the city pressed in. Somewhere behind steel, a bolt worked slow as thought. Pride might be part of this job across the way. The decoy wire twitched with no wind and audition flinch. They didn't fire. A company moved nearby, boots drumming a steel stair, the rhythm sliding like water through walls. He held, let the steps pass through him, and thought, "Come into my range, or force me to break discipline." Small science rules. He re-smeared soot on the scope's rim and checked the lens. A breath plume caught in a late sunshaft days ago had nearly drawn a bullet. He'd pressed glove to mouth and tasted wool hard enough to feel ice against lip. Each time he did it, the glove took his face's map. Kulikov tore a curtain and made a hood to break the crown line of his head against broken wall. You adapt like this when you suspect the other man took the same lessons. The next 3 kills weren't heroic. They were quick under the threat of a watching slit. A spotter leaned, the sleeve insignia flared, and then became smear. An NCO pointed with 2 fingers. Those fingers no longer pointed. Each shot was a note left on a table. "We won't duel on your terms. We'll keep closing your eyes." The reply stayed the same. Patience from steel. When fog rolled in, it rose like a tide, up to shins, then waist, then throat. Sound dragged near. No lure would be seen, no shot wise. Movement could happen without consequence, which meant a master could reposition, and a pair could be flanked in a place without flanks. Fog resets clocks. The slit became absence, then certainty of not seeing, and they learned again to breathe and not announce that breath. A runner reached their stairwell by evening, coat salted by river ice, and handed Danilov a note in grease paper. He read with lips, then without, a whisper built from habit. An elite German had come. He carried authority, maybe rank, maybe mandate. He had asked in his own language for one name. Orders that didn't need letterhead. "He's looking for you," Danilov said, not as prophecy but report, and the fog erased the next street. Zaitsev's pencil scratched through a propaganda sheet, headline ghosting under graphite, as he traced angles from the grain elevator to Red October. He and Kulikov counted brick courses and window bays, the way others count heartbeats. 5 panes on the smashed facade, 3 spans between chimneys, 120 meters to an overturned tram where a frozen scarf hung stiff. They marked dead space where snow stayed smooth. Each cross a place someone could die unseen. The Volga's breath rolled into alleys and erased pencil with its own unplanned plan. 300-0, Kulikov said, mitten knuckle touching the PU scope. But in this soup, you lose edges at 50. The Mosin lay across 2 bricks wrapped in felt, bolt slick free, muzzle dark with soot, so weak winter light wouldn't betray it. Zaitsev nudged the scope, and the crosshair crawled over rebar, bent into a crucifix, past a single snowflake floating in the lens like a thread he could cut. He circled a missing wall's rectangle on paper, a patient man's rumor with a rifle. The map dared someone to test it. They moved when fog thinned to gauze and snow squeaked under felt soles. Boot prints froze behind them on the factory floor, a brittle record they scuffed away with rags. Upstairs, the floor sagged where joists had burned. They stayed back from shattered windows, bodies flat against wall, pasted with damp newspapers. Zaitsev's face on a page lifted and fell as drafts passed, the letters of his name flexing. Paper makes dangerous echoes. They built their nest a body length back from the sill, a black square that reflected broken glass as shadow. Kulikov set a spotting scope on books gone to pulp, angled it through a gap between bricks, and smeared soot along the lens ring. He pressed fingernail to glass to check frost. Cold crept into bone, and he jerked the mitten back, breath caught and buried in wool. A single thread of white can betray you to another man with glass. Across the rubbled terrace, a helmet perched on rebar, rocking, then still when wind died. Helmets don't balance like that, and they don't lean into wind like grass. Zaitsev tracked past it and found a wire nicking brick, the tremor fine as a lash. The helmet tapped stone, a hollow spoon-on-tin sound. Kulikov tapped once on his boot. Hold. They did not shoot the puppet. That's for hungrier men. Fog peeled back and revealed a corpse staged in the courtyard, coat stiff with ice and one palm up, gray skin showing where glove met sleeve. It lay perfectly on their line. He watched the frozen blood surface unspotted by new drift, freshly moved or cleaned. Kulikov raised 2 fingers, then closed them. Deception. The wrist twitched, weight tugged under the sleeve. Somebody was testing patience with the dead. Experienced, Kulikov murmured. He draws fire with guilt. Zaitsev eased the bolt up a hair, then seated it, spring loaded. He warmed a cartridge in his palm and slid it into the magazine, counting soft clicks in his head. Volga crossings were thin with shell and ice and carried bullets like contraband under moon. Every sound now was a syllable to a stranger's ear. A ship moaned on the river as he shifted and saw it. A micro-wink, not at a window line or bottle, but along a steel plate propped in ash, small as arrogance. It came and went with a breath of sky. He counted the seconds until brightness kissed glass and retreated. A slit then, maybe glass behind it, to baffle wind. The heart taps harder when a theory becomes a shape. They'd heard German tricks in leaflets and from bandaged mouths. This felt like a diagram drawn inside their room. The frost rim around the slit was off-center, right-handed shooter keeping shoulders under cover. Not a perfect rectangle, but a letterbox cut with intent. He blinked, rested his eye, then looked again with a hair shift so his curiosity couldn't be predicted. He tells his students, never stare from the same place twice. Wind lifted the pasted newspaper. The picture of his clean face lifted too and fell. If the man across came for anyone, he came for the name on the wall. Fame is a sight line. The room cooled with that knowledge. Kulikov drew the plate's box on their sketch, extended a line of sight through torn rooms and cables. They were building geometry against a rival whose breath would be math. Day bled out without a shot. The German didn't take their movement. and they took none of his. A runner scuffed behind a low stair and hissed, "2 hours to shift, no ration till night." The words came in too loud with fog. Zaitsev's look sent him away. A drip from a busted pipe took over, clicking like a metronome that counts restraint. Their bolts stayed clean of oil. Steel turns glue in deep cold. His Mosin's bolt felt like a barn hinge, first stiff, then forgiving if coaxed. He cycled it in slow motion, no more than the knuckles. Metal's little noises tell stories to anyone listening under rubble. A comrade had died for racking too fast in the cold. Silence becomes a weapon too. Another helmet rolled in the courtyard, pushed by breeze and gravity, ringing a hollow human shape with an inhuman note. They didn't shift. He waited for a second wire tremor. None came. Beyond the bait, in the dark rectangles where rooms had been, an eye glistened and vanished through the slit, a wet glimmer, and then nothing. His own eye watered in sympathy, and he blinked it away with lashes. Hands stayed still. Smoke and fog braided low, visibility shrank to a veil, and then cleared like a camera for a heartbeat. They learned the other man's rhythm. Then, he didn't move with weather. He aimed on a timeline of mistakes, not cloud. His world was narrowed to a palm-sized letterbox. Theirs became equally small. Danilov crouched in, cheeks split pink, pencil behind ear, page in hand. "They'll print you outwitted him 3 times already," he mouthed. His breath smeared the wall. Kulikov swatted the air with a look. "It's not printed yet," Zaitsev whispered. Danilov nodded, tore his paper, offered the blank back to thicken their map. Ink makes belief. Belief needs accuracy. The identity drifted in like dust. König to some, Thorvald to others. No plate with his name, only method described rank. "Officers shout with fingers," Kulikov says. "Sharpshooters steal with them." They watched for theft and saw absence. Patience is a rank. A sunshaft slipped and struck a shard near their nest. A bright lick flashed and died. His glove smothered it, palm burning with cold. He imagined the other man seeing the kiss and logging men alive opposite, careful enough to bandage their own light fast. The room pressed close as if walls moved in. The corpse twitched again at dusk, sleeve thread showing as a pull from the slit's quadrant. Double bait, baiting them with a dead hand while hoping for a giveaway shot. 2 nets on 1 line. He respects that. Respect makes you slower, and slow makes you safe. Night brought no rest. They rotated watch on a cord tied to his ankle. 1 tug for change, 2 for movement, 3 for glint. Fingernails tapped on wood became speech. Sleep came in slivers. A shell landed a street over, and the room breathed. Plaster dusted their faces. Headlines looked like snow. Second day, a replacement spotter brought a message everyone already knew. Rounds were short, 8 for 3 pairs after dark. "Your fame eats bullets," the boy blurted and flushed. Zaitsev fingered 2 cartridges in his pocket and gave them jobs in his mind they couldn't fail. The best shot is the one you don't take. The math had turned. A stray dog nosed the corpse's palm, pawed the coat, then yelped as the arm leapt a fraction. It bolted. No shot from the slit. The man behind it was the sort who didn't shoot dogs. Professional, patient, or bound by a rule in his head. He filed that away. A code ties you. It also makes you predictable in other moments. Winter makes metal sing when it drops 2 degrees. Hinges whisper about breaking. The weather tightened them all. The helmet edged without wind, smooth, wire-reeled from farther than the plate. The line ran through a rusted hinge, twice around a bent nail, into sacks that had looked like trash. Depth, not straight lines. The adversary could work 2 strings while keeping both hands on the rifle. He'd brought a mind. They adjusted, pulling their felt pad a palm left and stacking a lip of brick to break muzzle shadow. The scope's crack forced a parallax he learned in 3 breaths. An imperfect picture saves a predictable head. Cold makes brittle. Imperfection can look like life. Kulikov exhaled onto his glove, wiped moisture across boards to dull them. He pressed his cheek and watched until his eye throbbed. Switched eyes. The world went flat. Through that shift he saw a faint halo around the slit that could only be one of three things: air moving with breath, fabric gauzing breath, or heat from a candle to keep the lens from frosting. Each answer writes a signature. Artillery rattled distant numbers across the blocks. Their radios served batteries. These two had cord and skin. Even far shells mattered. A blast could shake frost from the slit, make a glint appear. They counted cycles of fog and shells as if both obeyed clocks they could cheat. By the third dawn, neither had seen the other man move more than a tremor. Rime crusted the corpse's open mouth. He cupped his own breath again, the intimacy absurd. Fog rolled low. The world shrank to slit and steel and unseen breath. Coal smoke and iron smell insisted the city still existed. Melt traced along the floorboards and licked a bright spent case. He covered it with cloth, shamed by the shine. The slit hadn't blinked. That didn't mean it hadn't seen. Fog tugged as if by a hand. It lifted for a heartbeat, and the glint held for a fraction longer than it had before. He found the trigger wall and settled there. He did not fire. The glass behind the slot might be angled to bounce glint upward. If he shot the light, he'd hit steel. If he shot the dark under it, he'd feed the slit's hunger. They swapped the rest plan. He stayed on the rifle. Kulikov watched wires and bait. Bodies argued, knees like wood, hunger making thoughts ring. Night might bring 8 rounds, or none. He'd told students, trust light once per day. He pinned tomorrow's sun to a bent rebar, betting it would grind and throw a glare into the slit if they lived to see morning. Night erased faces and left breath ghost-thin at lip height. They learned to hold it and bury it in wool. They rotated watch in 10-minute turns, gloves thawing knuckles, eyes taking duty so fatigue wouldn't widen a sight picture when precision would determine who walked out. Not killing became the hard work, cold-drilled fingers until leather felt like tin. One shell burst north, and the newspaper beside their hide fluttered, Danilov's type moving like an audience in a draft. The bold name makes a beacon. Beacons draw duty. The man behind the steel might only need to stop a surname. Frost edged the slit's lip, white as a knuckle. It did not open. Stomach clenched and forgot to release. He crushed a sugar cube slow to keep sweetness stretched, not to wake throat muscles and shake the sight picture. The choice sat between impatience and pride, the same trap on both sides. He warmed a cartridge again and returned it to pocket. A Feldwebel with a good eye could be playing them like strings. He squeezed that thought until it hurt and then let it go. A runner made the steps, panting, 2 rounds each until night. He looked at the single ring of brass near his elbow and read scarcity as yet another trap. He tilted the soot cloth tighter around the scope so no glint would speak for him. A mortar thumped far off, gusting a wind that flipped Danilov's star headline. The paper flashed white. He pinned it to brick, black smearing his glove. For a breath he imagined the other man's gaze sliding to the flutter and looking for symbol rather than human error. He froze until the room settled. The first shot of the close ends came from the slit, not him. A chip of brick popped a foot from his cheek. Not lethal. A probe. The second shaved closer, meant to harvest the flinch the first asked for. He didn't give it. He counted spread and adjustment. The German was zeroed for rhythm, not range, bidding him to repeat a profile so he could erase it. Kulikov drew a rectangle in dust, rebar, beam, slit, and tapped twice at a spot left of center. Glass. On the first day, a bottle fragment had flashed when sun slid through rafters. If the hunter hadn't cleansed his hide, that vanity remained. Light would tell on it twice, only if fur and frost and hunger didn't spoil the seconds. They held. The staged body's wire was visible now, frost-furred. The helmet lay on its ear. Theater over. The other man had folded his puppets. This would be clean. He didn't spend a round to cut string and announce himself. He kept his round and his nerve. Decision set while sun shouldered through smoke, enough to matter. Glare bloomed on steel and slid across something behind it. He split the rebar cross, set the chevron low, left to fight the trick of light and winter air. The bolt was down. Breath was buried. He held not for silhouette, but for glass. The risk wasn't recoil. It was mechanics. Frozen metal lies. He nudged the handle a whisper to guarantee travel. A click now would sentence both. He pressed. The rifle broke clean. The muzzle shadow held. The shoulder took a gentle shove. The glint winked out like a moth. The plate stayed black and indifferent. A sound followed, dull and clothed. Not metal. Then nothing. No echo trap. No surety. They counted to 5, to 10, to 20. Nothing is an answer, too. They waded through a world that decided to be fog again. Debates sprouted. Dangerous? Necessary? Did he exist as a master? Did this shot find that man? Paperwork in Berlin would remain tidy to erasure. Memoir in Moscow would give details enough to heat a barracks. Between a slit and a thud. He tasted iron and knew better than to trust either silence or glory. He signaled stay while he began a crawl every sniper learns on the first day and relearns with bitten fingers. They would not sprint to confirmation. Upper floors are set back for a reason. Angles catch haste like traps. He ghosted along mapped beams, checked each pane for betrayal. Fog breathed in and out like a curtain you could be killed behind. Kulikov's cord tug froze him, heel skidding a pebble. Ordinary sound, enormous meaning. No reply. He slid another meter and found proof that would have to serve. The slit's rim had a chalk smear where a bullet shaved steel. The angle matched their nest. He'd threaded the needle, but it told him nothing the other side would print. Victories need proof. Proof demands exposure. Proof deferred becomes memory and then ink. When Danilov arrived later, cheeks raw, notebook wrapped like a relic, he listened to the thud, the glint, the slit, and saw an ending. He would write the master's name because certainty keeps men warm. He would make of one round a banner. Zaitsev nodded once. He knew ledgers, even when balanced, would be allowed to blur. Night then day, the river coughed rounds in the arms of men who carried brass inside their coats to keep springs honest. They returned to the floor. The bait corpse was finally a solid plank of winter. The decoy wire had tooth marks. Something starving had tried leather. The steel plate remained, slit dark. The gap behind it was too tight to recover a body without exposure. They stared into a furnace of absence. Reports filtered from a neighboring block. A German sniper carried away behind a furnace wall. Collar tabs hidden, face wrapped. A name whispered, then replaced, then whispered, with rank inflated. In Berlin, or nowhere, a file could have been stamped with silence and fed back through frost as myth. In Stalingrad, men chose the version where a master came and was met. It made rifles feel like more than metal. He cleaned the Mosin as ritual. Bolt out, action wiped bare, oil only where warmth persisted, soot renewed. The lens crack had become a friend, diffracting light and turning glints to questions. He chambered and unchambered a cartridge, warmed it again before putting it away. Every click was a promise and a risk. He pictured the German as discipline, someone who counted spans and glass and cold and narrowed options until pride wore duty's shape. He allowed a flicker of pity and folded it away with the cloth masking his scope. Extra weight is noise, noise wakes slits. Fighting shifted. Another cap's band flashed and vanished to a ragged shot from somewhere not the slit. Hunters on both sides worked their own maps and wrote their own stories that would only become ink if they solved bigger problems. He stepped away from bait faster now. One duel does not erase rules written in blood. Danilov pasted new pages near their nests. Headlines moved from individual tallies to encirclement maps, arrows closing the fist around the city. The master's story sat under them like a ribbon on a coat. He read and then looked away to snow drifting through a broken roof. Relief arrived where pride had been. Maybe soon the city would demand less theater from his glass. In the end, the payoff is a shape, not a name. A steel plate with a narrow mouth, rim iced white, and a silence behind it where breath had been. Major Erwin König, Heinz Thorvald, a nameless countersniper with a signed order. Snow that may melt or crust into history. Men who were there will argue in warm rooms and cold. Paper will shrug, the plate won't. Their day ends as it has to. Slow stand, careful withdrawal through a stairwell that coughs dust, water that bites like knives, crusted bread that hurts gums, murmurs about angles, and a nod about a choice that didn't kill them. Tomorrow they will return and glance at the slit that no longer watches them, not for victory, but to read if patience has changed its face. Snow sifts through a shattered ceiling onto a cooling rifle. A headline curls beside it as river fog seals the street, and they decide which nest to build before the next window of light opens.